Genesis 15 begins with a surprising statement. In verse 1, God tells Abram, "Do not be afraid." But here's the question. Afraid of what? The chapter doesn't tell us. Abram has just defeated kings, rescued Lot, returned victorious. So why start with fear? And then Abram says something unexpected. In verses 2 and 3, he brings up the same issue again. He still has no child, which is interesting because the promise was already given back in Genesis 12. Several chapters have passed, yet this question remains unresolved. So now you have to wonder, how long has Abram been carrying this question? And then God takes him outside. In verses 4 and 5, he tells Abram to look at the stars, not the ground, not the land, the stars. And then comes a challenge. Count them. But who can count all the stars? Why ask Abram to count something beyond his ability? And then verse 6 stands out. It simply says Abram believed. A short verse, but one of the most important in the chapter. Then the conversation changes. The focus moves from descendants to land. And in verse 8, Abram asks a direct question. How can I know? Not what, not when. How can I know? And God's response is unexpected. Instead of an explanation, he tells Abram to gather animals. Why? What do animals have to do with certainty? And then things become even stranger. The animals are divided. Birds begin to descend. Abram drives them away. Why include that detail? It feels so specific, so intentional. And then, in verse 12, darkness falls. A deep sleep comes over Abram, and suddenly the conversation shifts far into the future. God reveals that Abram's descendants will become strangers in another land. They will face hardship, and they will remain there for generations. Think about that. Abram asks for assurance, and instead of hearing only good news, he hears about future suffering. Why? Why reveal the difficult part at all? Why not just focus on the promise? And then comes the most mysterious moment. In verses 17 and 18, a smoking fire pot and a blazing torch pass between the pieces. Abram doesn't walk through. Only these symbols do. Why? What does that mean? And then the chapter ends. Not with a child, not with a celebration, not with the fulfillment of the promise. Just a covenant, and a future that still hasn't arrived. So the question is, why does Genesis 15 spend so much time showing Abram what will happen, instead of when it will happen? What do you think?